Hey guys, so pre-warning to this video is if you don't like sad stories, I really I'd turn off now because I'm struggling to say it myself. I've thought about doing this video for a long time and it's been a difficult decision, but I just couldn't not do it. You'll maybe realise why. So I had 5 leopard geckos. I have Gizmo, Minnie, Diego and Ziggy. But between Gizmo and Minnie, there was actually another one, and she was called Bindii. I actually got her from the same breeder I got Gizmo and Minnie from, and they were actually related. So I'll just show with this little graph here how they're related. Basically, Gizmo's mum and Bindii's mum and Minnie's mum, they were sisters, right? So mum 1 is Gizmo and Minnie's mum, and mum 2 is Bindii's mum. First year they had Gizmo, and the second year they had Minnie. Now their dad also had geckos with Bindii's mum, and so they're like cousins but half sisters, but still. So they were related. And the second year of having a leopard gecko, which was Gizmo, the second year I went to get Bindii. I went back to the breeder and brought her home in her new vivarium. I'd also planned to go and get another one that year from the same breeder, and that would of course be Minnie. So I went back, got Minnie, and I actually wanted to introduce Minnie and Bindii together. They were near the same age and I thought maybe they could live together, but when I did introduce them they sort of hissed at each other. They didn't really like each other and I didn't want to push it too much, so I ended up keeping them apart. Now when it came to Bindii's health, she was brilliant. She was active, she was a good shape and size. Every time I'd weigh her, because obviously I used to weigh them every week when they're babies, and she was absolutely perfect, the exact same as Minnie and Gizmo were, and just perfectly healthy leopard gecko. Then one night, when she must have been around 6 months old, she was shedding, and I got her out because she had a bit on her and she seemed to not be taken off too much, and I noticed she was really lethargic. Like, you know, normally geckos would just grip onto your hand. She was like a rag doll, and I was a bit concerned because when I put her back into the tank she just sort of sloped in, but I thought, you know, shedding maybe takes it out of them, but I was still kind of concerned. But that was really late at night and I went to sleep. Next thing, my friend comes round and I tell him that I'm pretty concerned about Bindii, because usually I come round and I'll show him my geckos, it's all good. So I explained what happened, and when I went up to see her, she hadn't really moved. She was sort of like a ragdoll. She was breathing, but it was really, really slow, really lethargic. Pretty much felt like that looked like there was no life in her. And whilst my mum called up the vets, we looked online for other things, and yeah, just there was nothing really could explain it. And so we went to the vets, and we went an extra half an hour away because we went to see the reptile specialist. And in the car, you know, you keep an eye on her and she would move a little bit and give you a bit of hope. But I mean, I'm not going to go into too much detail about at the vets because it breaks my heart. But yeah, basically she died. Now this happened like 7 years ago, but it still really gets to me, so I'm just going to take a break 1 sec. So I took all the papers, all the food that I fed her, and how I wrote down every time they shed, every time they went and ate and everything, and the vet was so impressed he didn't even charge us for the appointment or for putting down my gecko. Basically she was pretty much dead, but they have a very weak sort of pulse, it's hard to hear, and he said it'd be better to just put her down for sure. She was actually I'd only had her 3 months, and the only thing I can think of physically she looked a bit different was her body was nice and chunky, but her tail, it was chunky, but it seemed smaller than her body. The vet had literally no clue why it happened. I asked the breeder who she came from. She said possibly parasites, or there's sort of a thing that maybe she was sort of hatched that way, you know, born that way, something genetic, that sort of a ticking time bomb. and it felt like I'd had her ages, and it was only 3 months, but even now, it's like, it hurts so much, and yeah, it's something I blamed myself for a really long time. But even doing research, like parasites, there would be more sort of, sometimes leading up to it, it's more lethargic. And I can clearly remember her being so active, and it was such a shock that she died so quickly out of nowhere. So to this day, I don't really know what happened, and I'm pretty much putting it down to some sort of, I know they don't give birth or are born like that, but some sort of birth defect that she was just born with. And these are the only pictures I actually have of her, and you might be able to see what I mean about the tail. It wasn't a thin tail at all, it just didn't seem to grow with her. So I've cried a few times in this video, to be honest. I've had to stop the voiceover. It's a really hard video for me to make, and as I said, I've really debated whether or not to do this, but I find it hard doing a Leopard Gecko channel. I've also got a sore throat, by the way, so I find it hard doing a Leopard Gecko channel when I'm showing you all my geckos, and it sort of feels like I don't mention Bindii because there's a whole story attached to it, and I can't just keep explaining it to everyone, so I thought I'd do it in this video. For me, my pets mean so much to me. So when you get a pet that you assume is going to live for over 20 years and it dies after 3 months of having it, yeah, it really gets to you. And that's why I didn't get another gecko for another 4 years afterwards. It took me a really long time. I'm obviously still not over it. I still miss her. But yeah, so this is the story, and it's not a happy one, but I guess we can learn from it, and that's what matters.